Hi and welcome. This is Kevin Woodbury for Twin Suns Tutorials. Today I'm going to set up a shot for hyperfocal distance calculations. And I have a center statue, which is the subject of the shoot, but I also have behind and in front of this two other statues. And the total depth of field is going to be from 7 feet 1 inch to 13 feet 5 inches, and I got to make sure all that's in sharp focus. And the set that I have set up, I have some lights that just help illuminate it. The garage is kind of dark, and I also have a flash unit on the left there that's got a modeling light so I can see what I'm doing, but then it'll flash when I go ahead and shoot it. Camera is as level as possible with a central statue, as well as it's centered within that statue. So first thing I want to do is I want to go in and I want to focus on the center statue. That'll give me a normal shot at f/16 is the shutter speed I'm using, or aperture I'm using, and I'm using a 50mm lens. You're going to see in a minute a chart that helps me calculate everything, but so I want to get her eyes in sharp focus. That's not bad. So we'll just set this back so I can do a flash shot of it. I have a sync speed of 200, and then I'll go ahead and take the shot and we'll take a look at what we get. So here's the shot, and notice that as I go through this on the viewfinder, the back statue is pretty good. It's pretty sharp. So is the center one, but the foreground statue is a little fuzzy. So it's not bad, but it's not there. So I've got to calculate the hyperfocal distance at this point. So here's a chart that helps me do that. Across the top, we have the f-stops. Down the side, the left side, is the hyperfocal focusing distance. And if I'm using f/16 as my aperture, I've got to find something that fits into that set, which was 7 feet 1 inch through 13 feet 4 inches, I think it was. And I want to pick a setting that gives me a little extra. So if I look at this chart, I'm going to go down the f/16 column because that's my aperture. And I'm going to find something close to that 7.1 bit. So I'm going to look and pick 6 feet 4 inches to 23 feet. Now 23 feet is too far, but so the 6 feet 4 inches is a good starting place. It gives me enough depth of field for the front statue, and I certainly have enough at 23 feet for the back statue. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to focus on 10 feet. And the 10 feet is, know from having set this up, that the 10 feet is roughly at the crease of that crate that the center statue is sitting on. So if I go down a little bit so I can see that, I can now focus on that crease. And by the way, what I'm doing is I'm using the viewfinder or the live view to focus, and there is a video on that if you're not sure how to do it. But so let's get this in focus, and then I'm going to focus a little bit before, just to give me a little leeway. And I'm going to go ahead and shoot this. And here's the resulting image. If you take a look at it, the back statue is in sharp focus, and the center one obviously is. But look at the front statue, that's now in focus as well. Now all I did is move 4 inches basically forward. I focused a little shy of that center statue by about 4 inches. And that 4 inches gave me enough depth of field to get the foreground statue now in focus, which it wasn't before. So hyperfocal distances can make a huge difference in terms of the result of the image. Obviously, if you're in a landscape, you've got a whole lot different scale to work with. But those charts, which are available on the internet, and I'm going to put up the site right now, are available for every camera, every lens, every focal length, and they're well worth putting some time and effort into learning how to use. Just wanted to quickly show you how to use this table. The site I like is DOF Master. You have the link from the presentation. The three fields when you get to this that you have to fill out, or two technically, is the focal length of the lens that you're going to be shooting with. Again, if it's a zoom, you ultimately end up at a particular focal length, and so you need to put that in here. I'm going to say for argument's sake that it's 100, but it's as simple as highlighting it and then typing over it with whatever, I'll say 90, just so it's different. And then you need to put in the camera that you're going to use. And if you're a Nikon user, my condolences, but whatever your camera, you need to put that in here. And I'm going to stick with the Nikon D4 for a reason, but for now I'm going to just stick there. And then you have a choice in terms of how this chart appears. You have feet and inches, feet or meters. I'm going to stick with feet and inches. It's just a preference of mine. So once you have those 2 or 3 fields filled in, you hit calculate, and now this will reflect your choices that you made up here. So if you notice at the top it says Nikon D4, focal length 90 millimeters. So the way you read this chart is down the left side, on the very first column is a hyperfocal distance. And that's the distance at which you're going to end up focusing. But before you do that, you have to look within this chart to determine what exact f-stop you should be using. Now, if you remember at the beginning of the slide presentation or whatever that just transpired, I had shown you a side view of the 3 statues, and I had overlaid it with a depth of field gauge, if you want to call it that, which showed that the first statue stood at 7.1 feet from the camera. The back statue stood at 13.4 feet. So I have to find within this chart a setting that's going to give me that range so that I can ensure that the foreground picture or foreground statue is sharp as well as the background statue. So I look for, again, something starting at 7.1 or before. You know, I can do 6 feet, 5.4 inches as this one is, but it has to go out to 13 feet. So in looking through these, I don't see anything going out to 13 feet that's going to start at the 6 mark. You know, everything starts, for instance, here's one at 13 feet, but it starts at 11.2 is the beginning of the sharp range within the depth of field. So that's not going to cut it. So in looking at this chart, I don't see anything usable, which means that I need to change either my f-stop. Again, I can go down on the f-stops, but I still don't get what I'm looking for. Or I can change my focal length. And so I'm going to change this to 50 millimeters and hit calculate. And now there's a couple of choices available to me. So say I want to start at 6 feet 7 inches and go out to 14 feet. That gives me a very deep depth of field, which will cover both the foreground statue and the background. It might be a little much. This 713 is not enough because mine starts at 7 feet 1 inch, but this is 0.3, so it'll be fuzzy in the foreground. Here's 6 feet 4.2 inches, which goes out to 23 feet. That would certainly cover it. That's more than enough. But I think that might be where I'm stuck. Let's see, in looking through this, I could go to f22, excuse me, and if I start at, let's see, 6 feet 11.1 inches to infinity, that's actually a good range, and that's under f22. let's say I want to use that one. So I'm going to take this, and for illustrative purposes, I'm going to come back and I'm going to highlight this entire row. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to follow it to the left column. And what this tells me is if I want to go and use F22, which gives me coverage over a range of 6 feet 11 inches to infinity, all that will be in sharp within that range, I've got to focus my camera at 16 feet. That's how I read this. And assuming I do, both my foreground and my background should be tack sharp. There's other settings in here that would work. I mean, I could use 6 feet 4 inches and 23.7, which is more than enough in terms of the back part of the photograph. I could use that, and that means that I've got to focus on, see if I can get this to work, that is. I'd have to focus at 10 feet. So there are multiple combinations of choices here. You just have to look at them and decide, do I want F22? I try to avoid F22 when I can, so I go to F16. So actually I would prefer this one over the one I was just on, but it's a personal preference. But that's as easy as it is to use this chart. And I think it's easier than some of the downloadable calculators, which I find confusing. So it's up to you. I'm just offering it as something that's available, but I think it's a valuable tool. So for Kevin Woodbury and Twin Suns Tutorials, I hope this has all been helpful to you. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Take care. Bye-bye.